is a float that was designed for catching a lot of carp up in the water. Then big carp on days where it's very hot, very still, and you're slapping a big pellet in trying to catch big fish. Now, the float's profile, it's got a diamond shaped body. Now, this diamond shaped body works perfectly when you're fishing like this because it just seems to hold very stable regardless of the conditions. So even if you get quite a big wind on, even though it's a nice little light float, it doesn't tend to blow about at all. It just works perfectly for that diamond body. It's also got a thick bristle, 2mm bristle, which is really important when you're fishing with pellet shallow. You need to be able to suspend a 6mm and 8mm pellet, so that 2mm bristle is perfect for that. It's got a carbon stem. Again, there's no need for any heavier sort of material in the float. You tend to put most of your shot under the float with this method, so by having that carbon stem, it just stops it tangling, just gives it that bit of versatility. I just prefer a carbon stem on these sort of rigs, so it just works absolutely perfect. Now, like I say, the uses for this float, normally when I'm fishing shallow with big pellets, maybe big bits of meat, when I'm fishing for big fish. So when you're commonly doing the sort of slapping method, constantly slapping, trying to catch big carp. It's also a float you can use for mugging for big carp as well, so it works perfectly for that as well. So just an up in the water float for carp with baits like pellets and meat. Size wise, this float only actually comes in one size, and I just find it's the perfect size for any sort of depth, anywhere from as shallow as you can fish, sort of 6-8 inches, all the way up to maybe 3-3.5 foot. It just works perfectly well for that style of fishing, and it's a brilliant float for catching big fish, the Shalla Slapper. Shotting pattern on the Shalla Slapper couldn't be any more simple. When you're fishing for big carp, you want as slow a fall as a hook bait as possible as it's going through the water. So most of the time, I'll just use a bulk of 3 No. 9 stots just under my float. What's really important with this float is you've got to slightly undershot the float when you shot it at home. So by having 3 No. 9s on, allows you to put a 6 or an 8mm pellet on, and it'll just sit the bristle perfectly and working well. So got to make, take into account the fact that you are going to put quite a big bait on this float. So 3 No. 9 stots just under the float works perfectly. Now, when you're fishing anything up to say 2 foot of depth, that's absolutely perfect, that bulk under the float. But the nice thing about these floats is you can use them a little bit deeper. So if you go into venues like deep venues like hayfield where the fish sit maybe at 3 foot, I can just slide that float up a bit deeper to say 3 foot. And what I tend to do then is just place my bulk around half depth. So by having stots on the rig, I could just move it into half depth like that, and that just works brilliantly when you're fishing deeper than 2 foot. I tend to find if you fish for 3 foot and have all the shot under the float, there's a little bit too much loose line and it makes it difficult to turn your rig over and let it fish properly. So anything up to 2 foot, block a shot under the float. Anything over 2 foot, put your bulk at half depth. Perfect for when you're catching big carp shallow. Dead simple, dead positive.